When the reports first reached Rome, or rather, when the lack of reports did, a chill ran through the halls of power. The 9th Legion Hispana, one of the oldest and proudest in the empire, had gone silent. 5,000 men gone. In an empire built on order, silence was the most terrifying sound of all. Governors in Britain sent word to Emperor Hadrian, who had just taken power after Trajan's death in 117 AD. Trajan had been a conqueror, the kind of emperor who believed that Rome's destiny was to rule everything it could see. But Hadrian was different. He was cautious, a thinker, a man who believed that even empires needed walls. And so, out of fear and strategy, and perhaps guilt, Rome began to build one of the greatest fortifications in ancient history, a wall so vast it would mark the very edge of civilization itself. Hadrian's Wall, stretching 73 miles across, the wild northern frontier of Britain. From the River Tyne in the east to the Solway Firth in the west, this wall wasn't just stone and mortar. It was a message. To the tribes of Caledonia, this far and no further. To the people of Rome, the empire endures. And perhaps most hauntingly, to the ghosts of the 9th Legion, you will not be forgotten. Construction began around 122 AD, only a few years after the 9th's disappearance. Thousands of Roman soldiers, engineers, and slaves toiled across hills, forests, and rivers, carving a scar through the landscape that can still be seen today. Every fort, every mile castle, every watchtower was a reminder of Rome's fear and its pride. Behind that wall stood the might of an empire, still trying to convince itself it hadn't begun to fall. But even walls cannot stop questions. In the barracks of Eboracum, York, whispers spread among the legions who replaced the 9th. The 6th Legion Victrix had arrived from Germany, taking over their abandoned fortress. They found records abruptly ending, unfinished inscriptions, empty offices, as if everyone had simply packed up and left in the night. No one spoke of what happened. But soldiers talk, and their stories, half memory, half myth, spread across the empire. They said the 9th had been cursed by the Druids. They said they'd angered the spirits of the forests, the old gods of the north who despised Rome's arrogance. Others claimed the tribes had united, every clan, every warrior, and lured the 9th into a trap. The Romans, proud and overconfident, marched into a valley surrounded by hills. They never marched out again. No records survived, but in the silence, legends grew like weeds in the ruins. Hadrian himself visited Britain in 122 AD. He saw the desolation, the restless tribes, the shattered morale of his legions. He realized that Rome had stretched too far, and that every empire has a breaking point. Standing on the windy moors, Hadrian is said to have looked north and muttered to his generals, "We must keep the barbarians where they belong." And thus the wall became his answer. But beneath that answer was fear. Fear that Rome's grip was slipping. The wall took nearly 6 years to complete. It wasn't just stone, it was an entire ecosystem of power. Forts every mile, watchtowers every few hundred meters, garrisons of cavalry and infantry stationed to patrol the frontier. By day, banners flew proudly. By night, torches burned like stars against the endless dark. And beyond the wall, the wild lands of Caledonia, where no Roman dared go alone. For many Romans stationed there, life was misery. The cold was bone deep, the fog endless, the land alien and hostile. Some called it the edge of the world. Letters discovered by archaeologists at Vindolanda, fort just south of the wall, reveal the reality of Roman life in Britain. One soldier writes to his friend, "I have sent you socks, sandals, and underwear, for the cold here cuts through the bones." Another complains about the beer and the food. Another asks for more writing tablets, for the old ones have frozen solid. These are not the voices of conquerors, but of men exiled to the fringes of the empire, haunted by stories of those who disappeared before them. And yet Rome endured. Hadrian's Wall stood as both a triumph and a confession, a declaration that even the world's greatest empire knew its limits. But there was another, deeper change unfolding. The disappearance of the 9th Legion wasn't just a military loss, it was a psychological one. For centuries, Romans had believed they were invincible. From Spain to Syria, from Egypt to Britannia, they crushed every enemy, absorbed every culture, bent every god to their will. but the misty hills of the north whispered a truth no Roman wanted to hear. Even the strongest legions can vanish. Even the greatest empire can fall silent. The Ninth Legion's ghost lingered in the collective. Roman mind like a wound that never healed. As the years passed, the empire continued to fortify. New governors came and went. New legions were stationed in Britain. The 2nd Augusta, 6th Victrix, and 20th Valeria Victrix held the line. Trade flourished. Towns grew behind the wall. Life for a while seemed normal again, but the shadow of the Ninth never left. Each time a patrol vanished, the soldiers whispered, "The mist has taken them like the Ninth." Each time an officer went missing, the locals said, "The ghosts of the lost legion are calling them home." Rome was a civilization built on reason, on law, on order, but at the edges of its empire it met something older, something that could not be reasoned with. And so, Hadrian's Wall stood not only as a barrier of stone, but as a line between two worlds, the world of men and the world of myths. For centuries after, the wall remained. Long after Hadrian died, long after emperors came and went, the stones stayed silent, watching as the empire began its long, slow fall. By the 4th century, Rome was weakening. Civil wars, invasions, and corruption spread like cracks through marble. In the end, the legions withdrew from Britain altogether, leaving behind their roads, their ruins, and their ghosts. The tribes reclaimed the north. The wall, once the proud symbol of imperial strength, became a relic, its stones scavenged by farmers, its towers swallowed by moss. But even then, people still spoke of the lost legion. Travelers claimed to hear marching feet at night, echoing faintly through the fog. Farmers swore they saw figures in old armor wandering the hills, searching for a home that no longer existed. The legend had outlived the empire. In time, the story of the Ninth became more than history. It became myth. And myths, as we know, have a power history often lacks. It would inspire writers like Rosemary Sutcliffe, whose novel The Eagle of the Ninth reimagined the story for a new age. It would echo in films, in poems, in documentaries, because at its heart, it's not just about Rome. It's about us, our endless march into the unknown, our belief that we are invincible until we're not, our hunger for conquest, and our fear of what waits beyond the frontier. And so Hadrian's Wall, built from the ashes of the Ninth Legion, stands today not as a symbol of empire, but as a monument to mystery. The men who built it might be forgotten, but the men who vanished before it was raised, they became immortal. The Ninth Legion marched into the northern wilderness, where even the wind seemed to whisper warnings. The dense mist wrapped around the towering pines like a ghostly veil, muffling the sound of armor clanking and boots crunching over frozen mud. For days, the soldiers of Rome advanced through the forests of Caledonia, the untamed realm of tribes who lived and died by the blade, who painted their bodies blue with woad and believed that to die in battle was to be reborn among the spirits of the hills. To the Romans, this was not a land. It was a nightmare given shape. The local scouts had vanished days earlier, and the guides refused to go farther north, claiming the fog itself carried voices. At the head of the column rode legate Marcus Flavius Silva, a veteran of countless wars. He had served under Trajan in Dacia, crossed the sands of Arabia, and believed there was no barbarian he could not crush beneath Rome's iron heel. But even he felt the unease, that creeping sense that the forest was alive. Watching, waiting. Every few miles, the scouts found strange symbols carved into trees, twisted runes, spirals, and marks of blood. Some said they were warnings from the gods. Others whispered they were curses from the Druids, who lived deep in the northern highlands. The legion marched in silence, their red shields dulled by grime, their bronze helmets reflecting ghostly glimmers of pale sunlight filtering through the mist. Behind them, the Roman standard, the Aquila, the golden eagle of Rome, swayed with each step, its wings catching faint light, the symbol of Rome's eternal might. But even the Aquilifer, the soldier who carried it, dared not meet the eyes of the shadowed forest around them. As night fell, they built their camp in the Roman way, ordered, precise, efficient. Wooden palisades, ditches, watchfires at regular intervals. Yet this night felt different. The forest was too quiet. No sound of birds, no rustle of wind through leaves. The centurions barked orders, trying to keep discipline. But even the most hardened veterans glanced uneasily at the tree line. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of their torches, they could feel movement. In the middle of the night, it began. A scream, short, sharp, cut off before it could finish. The watchman on the northern post disappeared without a trace. Then another shout, then chaos. Arrows hissed from the darkness, striking armor and flesh alike. The fog glowed orange from the firelight, as hundreds of ghostly figures charged. Down the slopes, the Caledonians, painted in blue, their hair wild, their cries echoing through the valley. They moved like shadows, striking from every side. The Romans tried to form their testudo, the famous turtle formation. But the terrain was too steep, too slick, and the mist too thick to see their comrades. The line broke. Discipline in the heart of Rome began to crumble. Legate Silva rallied his men near the standard. "Hold the line!" he roared. "For Rome!" But the fog swallowed his words. He could barely see 10 paces ahead. The Caledonians seemed to come out of the earth itself, their blades flashing, their eyes wild with fury. The Romans fought bravely, steel against fury, order against chaos. Yet the hills of the north belonged not to men, but to ghosts. And in that cursed valley, Rome met its match. When dawn came, the mist lifted slowly. The battlefield was silent. Bodies lay everywhere, scattered among the bracken and blood-soaked moss. Shields lay overturned, spears broken, and the Aquila, the golden eagle, was gone. Of the thousands who had marched north, only a few dozen staggered back through the forests, their minds broken, their faces pale as death. The 9th Legion, once the pride of Rome, had been swallowed by the land itself. News of the disaster reached Eboracum weeks later. Messengers arrived bloodied, delirious, whispering of ghosts, of blue demons, of forests that devoured men whole. The governor of Britannia, Sextus Julius Frontinus, refused to believe it. He sent scouts, riders, then an entire cohort to verify the report. None returned. Panic spread quietly through the forts of northern Britain. The soldiers stationed along the frontier began to look over their shoulders more often. Even the civilians of Roman settlements spoke of omens, black ravens circling the sky, rivers turning red at dusk, strange lights in the northern hills. When word reached Rome, the Senate fell into uneasy silence. To lose a legion was unthinkable. The 9th was not just an army, it was a symbol. To admit its destruction was to admit weakness. Rome did not lose. Rome erased. And so the official records were quietly adjusted. The 9th Legion's name faded from military rolls, its banners removed from the temples of Mars. It was as if the Legion had never existed. But the story did not die. Merchants traveling through Gaul spoke of ghostly soldiers seen marching in the mist. Sailors claimed to hear the clash of shields echoing across the northern seas during storms. And in the centuries that followed, the legend of the Lost Legion grew. Meanwhile, far across the known world, another tale began to emerge, one that would confuse historians for centuries. In the western deserts of China, near a remote village called Lycion, locals spoke of ancient foreigners, tall men with pale skin and deep-set eyes, who fought in formation using metal shields and practiced a strange turtle-like defense. They called them the men of fish-scale armor. Some scholars in later centuries would speculate. Could these be the descendants of the Lost Legion? Had survivors been captured, sold as mercenaries, and journeyed east across the steppes, ending up in the service of the Han Empire? There was evidence, traces of Roman-style weapons, coins bearing Latin inscriptions, even skeletal remains with European features buried in that region. The Chinese chronicles mention a strange foreign unit that fought bravely in the Battle of Ziji around 36 BC, but the timelines blurred, the stories twisted, history and legend entwined like smoke. Back in Britannia, however, the consequences of the 9th's disappearance were very real. Rome had learned a painful truth, that the northern wilderness was unconquerable. The Emperor Hadrian, upon hearing the reports, ordered a drastic measure. The empire would no longer stretch its power into the mist. Instead, it would build a wall, a barrier between civilization and chaos, between Rome and the unknown. But that was yet to come. For now, the land of Caledonia was silent once more. The tribes returned to their hills, carrying trophies and songs of victory. The Romans who survived fled south, their minds haunted by what they had seen. At night, they claimed, they could still hear the screams of their comrades echoing through the fog. Some said the spirits of the ninth still marched under the pale northern moon, trapped between worlds. Neither dead nor alive, guardians of a secret Rome dared not speak. And so the legend grew, whispered by soldiers in faraway forts, by priests in crumbling temples, by poets who found beauty in tragedy. The Ninth Legion, the Hispana, the Invincible, the Eternal Eagle, vanished not in defeat but in mystery. And sometimes, mystery is more powerful than victory. The hills of Scotland kept their secret. Even 2,000 years later, archaeologists would dig among those same mists, searching for a sign, a shield, a coin, a fragment of armor, anything that could tell the final story of the men who disappeared into the fog. But perhaps that was Rome's final lesson. Empires may rise and fall, but some stories are meant to remain unfinished. For in that wilderness, the power of history itself was born, the power to remind mankind that even the greatest civilization can be humbled not by an army, but by the silence of the unknown. When the news of the Ninth Legion's disappearance reached Emperor Hadrian in Rome, it struck him like a thunderbolt. He was no ordinary ruler, a philosopher, a builder, a thinker, but even he knew the truth behind Rome's pride. The empire's strength wasn't just its armies or its cities. It was the illusion that Rome was invincible. And now that illusion had cracked. The Ninth Legion, 5,000 of Rome's finest, had vanished into thin air, swallowed by the misty lands beyond the frontier. Hadrian summoned his most trusted generals to the imperial palace. The Senate chamber echoed with angry voices. Some demanded revenge, others argued for retreat. Hadrian, calm yet cold, listened in silence. Finally, he rose and spoke, words that would shape the fate of Britain, and perhaps all of Rome, for centuries to come. "Rome will not chase ghosts," he said. "We will build a wall that marks the edge of the world." The decision shocked everyone. Rome was known for conquest, not containment. But Hadrian understood something that many did not. Empires collapse not when they are defeated, but when they stretch too far. And so began one of the greatest engineering feats in human history, the construction of Hadrian's Wall, a barrier of stone and discipline that would forever mark the limit of Roman ambition. The project began around 122 AD. Tens of thousands of soldiers, engineers, and laborers marched north to the wild frontier of Britannia. There, where the rolling hills met the endless mist, they began to build. For 80 Roman miles, roughly 73 modern miles, the wall would snake across the island, from the eastern coast near the River Tyne to the western shores near the Solway, Firth. It would stand 15 feet high, 10 feet thick, with watchtowers, gates, and forts at regular intervals. To the Romans, it wasn't just a wall, it was a statement. Each stone laid into its foundation carried a message, thus far and no farther. The construction took 6 long years. Soldiers worked through rain, snow, and freezing winds. They carved the stone by hand, built fortresses, dug ditches, and raised towers that reached toward the gray northern sky. Smoke rose from countless campfires as engineers drew plans by torchlight. The rhythm of hammers and chisels echoed across the hills, a mechanical heartbeat of the empire itself. But even as the wall rose, whispers spread through the ranks. Some soldiers claimed they could still hear the ghosts of the Ninth Legion, screams in the fog, armor clanking in the distance, figures seen at dawn along the ridges. The local tribes, the Picts, said the Romans were building not to keep men out, but to keep spirits in. They believed the wall was a curse, a scar across the sacred land of the gods. Hadrian, ever the rationalist, dismissed such tales. To him, the wall was a symbol of control, a frontier not only of land, but of the Roman mind. Yet in the quiet moments, even he wondered. He would stand upon the hilltops, gazing north into the endless wilderness, the wind howling around his cloak, and ask himself whether Rome had truly conquered anything at all. Below him, the men of the legions toiled. Among them were veterans from Gaul, Spain, and even Africa, men who had fought in deserts and jungles, now facing a new kind of enemy, the cold. The land seemed to reject them. Tools froze in their hands, fires died in the rain, and food spoiled faster than it could be rationed. They were no longer fighting barbarians. They were fighting the land itself. Yet slowly, stone by stone, the wall came to life. Great gates were built at mile castles, where Roman patrols could pass into the north. Towers stood like sentinels, each manned by a handful of soldiers watching the horizon day and night. To the south, small towns grew around the forts, markets, bathhouses, temples. Civilization against the wilderness. But beyond the wall, in the shadowed glens and ancient forests, the tribes watched. They were not beaten. They were waiting. They knew Rome would never understand this land, its spirits, its storms, its silence. Years passed. Hadrian's Wall became more than stone. It became a living border between two worlds. To the south lay order, law, roads, Latin speech, and the eagle of Rome. To the north lay chaos, freedom, and legend. The soldiers who manned the wall often said it was like living at the edge of reality. The wind that swept down from the moors seemed to whisper voices from another realm. One cold winter night, a patrol from the 2nd Legion reported strange lights beyond the northern hills. Torches flickering, moving in formation, disappearing into the fog. The centurion laughed, saying, "Ghosts don't march in ranks." Yet when they went to investigate, they found footprints in the snow, heavy, deep, perfectly aligned, just like Roman marching lines. And no one had passed through the gates. Stories like that spread like wildfire. Soldiers began leaving offerings at the base of the wall, coins, weapons, even bread, hoping to appease whatever haunted the frontier. Chaplains performed rites, invoking Jupiter and Mars to protect them. But the north was not the realm of Roman gods. It belonged to something older, something wild and eternal. Meanwhile, Hadrian returned to Rome, leaving his generals to maintain the new boundary. The wall had become both a triumph and a tombstone, a reminder of the limits of empire and the cost of ambition. Trade continued across the gates. Diplomacy was tried, but never again did Rome attempt to conquer Caledonia. The lesson of the 9th Legion had been burned too deeply into the soul of the empire. Yet the story did not end there. Decades later, under Emperor Antoninus Pius, Rome tried once more. He ordered a new wall, farther north, called the Antonine Wall, but it failed. The tribes struck again, fierce as ever, and within years, the Romans abandoned it, retreating to Hadrian's Wall. The wilderness reclaimed its dominion. As centuries passed, the mighty wall weathered storms, invasions, and time itself. The empire began to fade, its strength waning. Soldiers stationed there grew old, their replacements fewer. The pay came late. Supplies dwindled. The once mighty frontier became a lonely outpost of a dying empire. And yet the wall stood. There's a haunting beauty in what it represented. For generations, men had come from across the world to guard this line. Some were born under the burning sun of Africa, others from the frozen valleys of Gaul. They carved their names into the stones, left prayers for home, drew crude sketches of their gods. They didn't know it then, but they were guarding the edge of history itself. Then, sometime in the 4th century, as the empire's heart began to crumble, the wall's purpose faded. Garrisons deserted, forts fell silent. The stones were taken by locals to build farms and churches. The great line of empire dissolved into the hills, but legends persisted. Travelers still spoke of strange music on the wind, of ghostly legions seen marching under the moon, their armor glowing faintly in the mist. Even now, nearly 2,000 years later, Hadrian's Wall still stands, scarred, broken, but unyielding. Stretching across the wild northern lands, it remains one of history's most powerful symbols. Tourists walk its length without, realizing they tread on the same ground where an empire once held its breath, the edge where civilization met mystery. Archaeologists still search the soil near the wall, hoping for a sign of the 9th Legion, a lost shield, a carved stone, an inscription that might whisper the truth. But perhaps some stories aren't meant to be found. Perhaps the 9th's true legacy isn't in bones or bronze, but in what it taught Rome, that no power, no matter how vast, can conquer the unknown. Hadrian's Wall was more than a fortification. It was a mirror reflecting the fragility of empire. Behind its stones lay the fear that even Rome, The eternal city could not last forever. And so, centuries later, when the empire finally fell, the wall remained silent, cold, eternal. The eagles of Rome had flown, but their shadow stretched across time. Because in the north, where the mist still rises and the wind still sings through the stones, the story of the lost legion and the wall they inspired still echoes, a whisper from history itself. Thus far, said Rome, and no farther. But the land never listened.